Ghost Stories, Part 3 by Dana Lee. Chapter 24. It wasn't eerie, though, rather warm and inviting. My friend chose the nicest room. It had a king-size canopy bed. The canopy was cotton and looked like a giant daisy. He said he wasn't worried about trespassing and would pay on his way out in the morning, which is standard procedure with pricey bed and breakfasts anyways. While sleeping, I dreamt that a small man, a bit stocky, probably in his 50s, wearing a green vest, jumped out of a closet at me, smiling in a yellow burst of light. His arms were outstretched as if to say, "Ta-da!" Only he didn't speak a word. The next morning, the place was quiet again. Nobody at all was around, so we left. Thinking it all very strange after I got back to campus, I started asking around. I discovered that the inn was closed and would not reopen for business until summer. I also heard that it was supposedly haunted by a former owner who had died there. Anyways, he's all right by me. Chapter 25. Initially, I had intended this as an appendix to a 6-year-old ghost story of mine, but looking over my entries, I see somehow this rather important ghost story never made it here. I can't figure out why, so I must start at the beginning. When I first moved to Reading, I lived in an old red brick house in the little old town of Sinking Spring. The house sits by the railroad tracks. There are a lot of trains in Reading to this day, and an old school which had been converted into apartments. It actually sits on the corner of a small crossroads. The first strange thing that I noticed was that at least every other week a car would stall and break down there. Then I'd hear somebody running up the steps every day at about the time school let out. Also, would go out, return to see that the attic light was on. I did not have the light on. Ron also started talking in his sleep. This would freak me out only because he spoke in a little girl's voice. He also tried to rip up my Raggedy Ann one night in his sleep. These turned out to be small things compared to what was yet to come. One night Ron was away on business and I was alone in the bathroom which faced the road. I heard screaming and yelling, what I could only call an angry altercation, then a huge accident. It sounded like a train. I got so scared that I just crumpled on the floor in a ball and waited to hear the police and ambulances, only they never came. I sat there on the bathroom floor for what seemed like hours, as I was certain somebody must have died in such a noisy accident as that. I was confused. Finally, I got up and looked out the window. Nothing. The streets were as dark and desolate as before, and nobody was around. I had no idea what had happened. I do know that when I had to cross the narrow train tracks, I would always run across them in what I can only call an unfounded panic. I hated them. Also, I noticed scads of stuffed animals were placed there, and figured there must have been a child killed there. About the same time, I started seeing people, men and women, parked there, sitting in their car at the tracks. I thought they must be family members of the victim. They would always look at me and smile, and I remember feeling sorry for them. Then one night we were sitting in the living room watching television when a panicky bang 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 came at the back door. It was so scary that Ron actually ran out with a marine knife in his hand. Shiner went about ballistic, and he does not get scared very often. Terriers are pretty tough little dogs. There wasn't anybody around, and we would have seen or heard anybody that had run away, as there are windows that line that entire side of the house, and the street runs up and down. I was so curious about these things that I went to the library to look them up. At first, I thought that maybe it was the old man who had lived next door. I heard he had died just prior to us moving into the house. But it wasn't him. At the library, I discovered that there had been an Indian massacre in the town prior to the 1700s, but of course, like any small town in America, they'd want to keep that hush-hush. I used to walk past a birdseed mill every day, where a lot of crows liked to hang out. Across from that, there was an old mound covered in rocks, vines, and trees. I always thought that there were Indians buried there. I also discovered that the kids had tried to burn that school down at least twice, but not a lot more. One day I asked a woman from around here about it. I told her about the accident that I had heard and asked her if there had been any sort of horrific accident around there. She said that there had been a woman and a child in an accident right around there maybe 10 years back, but she did not know much more about it, besides the fact that they had been murdered. I had written this ghost story in my MySpace blog, and as it was, one of my friends there knew all about it, as he had gone to high school with one of the women that was killed there. His information led me to look up the entire story online, only discovered that it was worse than ever. Apparently this woman in her early 20s was trying to break it off with her boyfriend, the father of her 2-year-old child, but he had been stalking her. She was at the McDonald's with her friend, another woman. I think it said she was only 21, and her 1.5-year-old baby. The boyfriend showed up there and chased the 4 of them in their car to the railroad tracks just as the train was approaching. He was behind them in his car when he shouted, "Where you gonna go now, bitch?" and rammed them into the oncoming train. The 2 women and both of the children were killed upon impact. If I remember the story correctly, the man got 4 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. This was about where my first edition of the ghost story had ended. But since then, there had been some other occurrences that I have not spoken nor written about due to personal reasons. I cannot seem to shake the old-fashioned idea that some things should never be spoken of. First, the neighbor behind us committed suicide. I knew about this before I knew about it. I heard the woman screaming when she had found his body. When you hear that sort of scream, you know it. I was extremely depressed in the house. I would lay in bed and pray to die. One night in the bedroom, I saw a translucent gold demon with a ram's head come out and rise from beneath the bed. Even his eyes were golden, and he sort of glowed in the dark. This might sound crazy, only Ron had seen it too. Unlike myself, he is a very logical person. I thought the demon must be personal at that time, but not so much anymore. I found on the steps and smacked my head off to the hardwood floor. I could have sworn that I was pushed. One morning I awoke and I could not walk for days. I still cannot understand what happened there, but I would scream just to sit up. The old woman across the street died. She had just waved to me from her window just before. After we moved, the next tenant had attempted suicide too. He also caught the house on fire. He blamed it on the cats. I wouldn't believe that, only I had heard cat ghosts there before too, clawing at the stairs, crying. Only we did not have a cat. I thought it was my dead cat following me. I always thought she had the demons. Now is when I've got back to thinking about the night that I had heard that accident as true as life. Remember, I thought at the time that it was a very real accident. As far as I know it, the killer is still alive in jail. Now, he was Hispanic, and knowing how family-oriented and Catholic the Hispanic community is for the most part, I'm sure what he did, killing his own child and the mother, would be considered especially heinous to them, and to most, so he might well have been off in the joint, in which case my thoughts hereafter are completely irrelevant, but if he is still alive, I see them as important proofs to myself at least. I heard an angry altercation before the crash. I heard a fight, yelling and screaming. That's why I was so scared. It didn't sound like any ordinary car crash. It sounded deliberate, like murder. Hearing him, if he's still indeed alive, and I have no reason to believe otherwise, as this was not that long ago, and he was young, means that his ghost is residual, a pre-recorded space in the energy there. The screams and shouts were somehow recorded there, and maybe having only heard it once, it might have even been on the anniversary of their deaths. Somehow he's alive, only his voice has been recorded and captured there. I suppose the panic and the evil have left their trace in the very atmosphere. I also think that the banging we heard at the door was them. Only I don't attribute the lights left on, the running up the steps, the pushing or paying to any of them. I think the place might be cursed. The thing that's there might even predate the Indians as far as I can tell. Maybe it's just all of the negative energy balled up there. The roof fell in on that house right after we left it, too. Chapter 26. This was posted on March 23rd, 2013. I've been neglecting my ghost stories, but that doesn't mean that they haven't been around. The first notable one happened back in October, I think. There have been a lot of break-ins around the neighborhood in the past year or so. I'd been a little on edge, pitying the fool. Anyways, I was out on the back porch one evening when I saw a man in a brown jacket and pants come out from behind the little witch's house. There's a fence and evergreen trees behind the little shed. I think he was carrying a lantern or a flashlight, and he might have been wearing a hat, but I can't be sure because it all happened so fast. I jumped up, started screaming as soon as I could, and ran in the house. Ron came out armed and looking, but he couldn't find anybody. He could have possibly gotten away if he was lucky, but now I'm not even sure if he was ever even really there. Here's why. I had been asking my house ghosts to watch over the house. Also, I don't know how he could have possibly gotten away so fast. He couldn't have gotten over that fence or through those trees even if he was a gymnast. I also had to admit to myself, as I was pretty shaken up over the whole ordeal, that this guy looked a lot like the same ghost that I had seen toppling out of the back seat of a car at the bank a couple of years past. Then again, in December I think it was, I swore I saw the same guy, only this time he was for sure swinging a lantern, walking down the street one night. Only he just vanished, as they do. Then, after I'd put up the Christmas tree, I'd look at it, only to see a man standing in front of it, for an instant, then it'd be gone. This happened several times, and it wasn't in the slightest bit creepy, and the ghosts usually really creep me out. I had later discovered that my cousin had only just passed away. I loved my cousin. When I was out walking the golf course with Shiner, I had a vision that all of my cousins were now together, and the one that had only just passed said I can do a lot more from where I am now. I think it might have been him at the Christmas tree letting me know. Finally, just the other night, I was at the grocery store in the parking lot loading up my trunk. It was terribly cold and windy. I saw who I think was the same man again in the brown jacket and pants, but as usual he was there and gone in a flash. I'm quite sure he's most always around, whoever he is, and I have my suspicions. Earlier that same morning, in the wee hours before the sun had risen, I was on my computer. After I'd shut it down, I got up and the flashlight on the kitchen counter was on. I know for sure it wasn't on before that, as it was dark in the room, and I would have seen it. I was also the only one up in the house, and I know I hadn't turned it on. Anytime that Ron is away, I usually neglect the second floor of the house because I can hear him or them up there and figure I'll let them have the place to themselves. In fact, the last time that he was away, I'd walk past the man room where I never go anyways, only to see somebody sitting at his desk. It has gotten so that I don't even give him a second glance because I know he's not really there. Chapter 27. I can hardly believe it's time for yet another ghost story, but it is, and two good ones back to back to boot. Anyways, first, I was sitting out on the back porch yesterday morning. I heard at first what I thought to be very loud music coming from back behind the trees, the Spanish people's house. I have nothing against the Spanish people nor their loud music, but the next door neighbor, who is moving, sits on her back porch and screams at them, "Shut up!" So that's what I first thought I was hearing, although it was very early Sunday morning. But then I noticed it wasn't actually music. There was no music. It was more of a chant. Then I was thinking that the Spanish people must be having some kind of exorcism because that's what it was sounding like. I was also thinking that it was too loud and not Spanish, but I didn't know what it was. It sounded tribal, but not African. This is when it stopped. So I thought, okay, short ritual, then it started again. Only quietly and from another location altogether behind the trees. Then it stopped and started a third time, as if to let me know for damn sure that they were ghosts and native. This time quieter still, past beyond the house as if they were moving on. All at the same time that I realized what was going on, I also had that weird feeling of belonging somewhere at some time that I get at times, a mortal compass, I think. Just the day before, I had seen my best friend and was telling her how the house is built over an invisible pond that the shamans and animals can sense. Maybe it was even a pond long, long ago. I hadn't fully realized that these even really existed until reading Ghost Dogs of the South. There was a story in there about a pair of hounds that had vanished into one of these lakes, and their owner even heard the splash. That's a very good book, by the way. This house vanishes in the fog each night, leaks, is covered with dew, and even after the snow has melted everywhere else, we have snow. I think the natives were communicating because they must have known I was only just talking about them. I don't know, but I only just encountered another something out there in broad daylight, which is what had spurred this ghost story on. I don't even know if it was a ghost. It might have been some sort of nature spirit because it just came out of one of the small pine trees in a golden smear from the corner of the front yard. It looked like a young man, but golden and very fast. I do wonder about him as he didn't seem to be human. He might have been wearing shorts. It was too fast to tell, but he was life-size. This house is protected with native mojo, and I think it keeps a lot of the ghosts out too. That would be why I'll hear them at the doors. Ghosts have a thing for doors and steps, though. I don't think the natives hate me, though, because I have two different kinds of native blood from two different sides of the family. It's a good thing. Chapter 29. As tainted as Point Pleasant seemed, Woodward Cave is sacred, good spirits aplenty. We stayed in a cottage just yards away from the mouth of the cave, and about twilight I swore I saw a misty blue spirit drift out from the totem pole. I had only slept a couple of hours the night before, so after returning from Penn's Cave, passed out until after 1 in the morning. That's when I went out on the porch and experienced lots of weird things. First, looking out towards the cave and the totem pole, I could see lots of strange movements amongst the mist, more bluish shapes. Also, there were oval patterns of gold bars flashing in the dark. Then, right alongside the cottage, where the car was parked, I could hear several bodies walking through the gravel drive. At first I got really spooked, but then I got a very warm feeling in my chest and started experiencing all sorts of wonderful expressions through my mind's eye. I do have Seneca ancestors, and I felt as if they knew this and were welcoming me. I got the feeling that it was a seriously sacred place, also that they liked my pajamas, which is pretty funny as they are intricate green patterns of jewel tones, and I do think the ancient natives would have gotten a kick out of them. First, I felt one in particular that was right alongside the porch. He liked my smoke I was smoking. He said his name was Ghost Bear. Actually, he said his name in Seneca language, which was something 3 syllables with a SH and lots of vowels, but I knew what he meant. He had a bearskin headdress and showed me that he had killed a big, mean brown bear that also haunted the spot. They were entwined, or twin spirits, something like that, his totem. He related this all to me. There was also a medicine man who wore a buffalo headdress with short, dark horns. And he also told me his name, something with a C-H-A-I. Anyways, he seemed to have a lot to talk about, as I think he followed me back into the cottage, as I got all of these different impressions from him while I was in the bathroom, and the door opened and closed on its own as if he had followed me in. First he was telling me that if I made a rattle, I could call them. I do know how to make native rattles, as Grandpa made them, but all the while in my mind I was discussing with him how I'd make a different kind with magic spirit rock chips instead of dried berries on the rattler. He was telling me how the animal skin was crucial as it carried the spirit of the stag on the drum part, but I doubt my rattle will be made of skin and gut. Then we discussed magic wands and the Great Spirit. I think there was also a woman wrapped in a cougar pelt, and in my mind's eye I could see a whole community of long wooden houses, dark and smoky inside, comfortable. I got the feeling that these guys were from the 1640s. Anyways, there were other spirits that moved through the cottage too, all good. A British soldier named Jonathan Edwards, but not the sinners in the hands of the angry God one. And Ralph Bellamy from the 40s. All very weird for me to get all these names and stuff. Anyways, there was no way I was going back to sleep, so first made a video in the dark of all the happenings, then another of the cave at sunrise. These videos are on Daily Motion. That is the end of my ghost stories for now. I think there was something missing in one of them, or a missing story, where I had heard something come out of the drain one night and asked me what I was doing. It really scared me. And, yeah, there's definitely a ghost story missing, because the other thing that had happened, that it's a major ghost story, actually, that I haven't written down yet, so I should include here at the end as an appendix, is, one night I was sleeping upstairs in this house, and I was dreaming. This was probably, maybe 10 years ago. In the dream, there were other people in the dream. Ron was in the dream, and I don't know who the other people were, but I had the feeling that I lived like in Slippery Rock. I lived in a little house. There weren't a lot of things in the house. But there was fruit on the table in the house, and I could levitate things in this dream. And I was levitating the fruit in the dream, and Ron nor anybody else in the house, because there were other people present in the house, they weren't really impressed with the fact that I could levitate things in the dream. And then, I'm still sleeping, I'm still dreaming, and I feel somebody tuning in Tokyo on my nipples is what it was. So that's what startled me to wake. And as I woke, I was, catatonic. I couldn't move. Paralyzed. I couldn't scream, nothing, but I could see that the room was, it was dark, but it was opposite. First of all, there was white static in the air, which you could feel the hum, the electricity of, sort of like smell it, like a white static television screen. And everything in the room that should have been black was white, and everything that should have been white was black. And I looked over, I still couldn't move, but I looked over to the entrance of the room, and I saw a tall man in a painter's outfit. You know, a white shirt, white pants, white hat. The man himself was completely black, and his clothes were completely white. And he smiled at me as if in sort of like motion, like, there you go, chickie, like that, you know, sort of, with big white teeth. And then he left. And only then I could move. And I got up and I ran downstairs and I still couldn't speak. I was like hysterical. And Ron was like, what the hell is the matter with you? You're crazy, you know? And he wasn't really interested in my story or anything. It really scared the hell out of me. It's one of the scariest ghost experiences I've ever had in my life. I'm not sure who he was exactly. I have suspicions once again, but I did, right after we moved in here, there's a nightclub across the street. It's closed now, but it used to be open. A lot of things happened there at the nightclub, really bad stuff, like rapes and stuff like that. Anyways, as the story goes, there were these two guys and a girl, and they were best friends, and they were at the nightclub. The one guy's name was Wilvin Alvarado. He was from Lititz, which is a small town, maybe a half an hour from here. And I believe he was a construction worker, actually. He was a young man. I think he was 21, or in his 20s anyways. And as the story went, his friend shot him in the head out there. I heard the gunshot and the screams that night that happened too here, and I was hysterical the night that happened. I knew somebody died that night. As the story went, the best friend just shot him and killed him because, like, one of them wanted to leave and go shopping and the other one wanted to stay. There had to be totally more to that story than what they actually said. I think that probably the girl that I heard screaming probably was more involved with what actually happened than the story one. I don't think it was all about shopping at the mall. You don't shoot your best friend in the head and kill him over shopping at the mall, right? But I don't know, it could have possibly been him. I've also heard, I've been touched now, that wasn't the first time that I was touched. That was actually, I think, the fourth time that I was touched. The first time I was touched was somebody put their hand on my shoulder, back when I was 21. The second time that I was touched was when I was hugged in the house in Oakland. That thing moved through my body. The third time I was touched was once again the hand on the shoulder, the guide in Lilydale. So this, and this was, once again, just like the hug, I felt extremely violated, you know. This was the fourth time I was actually touched. You know, the Irish say touched. And I do have the white streak, which I woke up with when I was 21. That is true. I wasn't born with the white streak. I woke up with it one morning, completely total, when I was 21. It doesn't die. Well, it dies a little bit. It'll turn pink for a day or so until it washes out. But it doesn't have any pigment, so it, you know, it's white. And I've heard that certain people, if the spirits touch them because they can move on, they can pass on through touching you. If you're one of these touchy people, like, I don't know. I'm not real touchy, actually. But anyways, I'm gonna have to write that one down. I haven't included that one yet. And I think that is really, it's pretty much all for my ghost stories. Now, I do see them still here sometimes. I try not to talk to or speak to or anything like that, or really too much like that. I don't really think it's healthy. I did see my dad, you know, after he passed away. And before he passed away, when he was in the hospital, I had a dream. It was a vivid dream, actually, that my Uncle Albert, who was my dad's little brother and had already passed on, he was sitting and waiting with somebody. It looked like a waiting room, you know, in a hospital, or just a white room with a window. And there were two chairs, and he was there, and I knew somebody was in the other chair with him, but it was just an energy, a gold mist of energy that I could see in the dream. And Uncle Albert was there, and he was so happy, and he was smiling, and he had like a mauve, like purple sort of pants, and like a mauve sort of short sleeve shirt on. He looked very good, and he would look very happy. And I woke up feeling very good and very happy. Like you know, I knew what was going on, but I thought that the gold mist was somebody that I thought that I didn't see them because it was somebody that I didn't ever know or didn't ever see. And I think that it was actually my great-grandmother, my real great-grandmother, who died in childbirth. Her name was Anna Devine, and I think that she wanted to meet my dad, and that she was there with Uncle Albert to pick him up. That's who I think it was, anyways. So that's not really a ghost story, but it is sort of too. So I am going to have to write those down as well. And then thank you very much. Good night, or good morning.